Picture a winding driveway cutting through the lush green of the Sussex countryside, leading toward the imposing facade of Buckhurst Park. On February 26, 1893, in one of the manor's ornate chambers, a baby girl took her first breath. Named Lady Idina Sackville, she was the eldest child of Gilbert Sackville, 8th Earl de la Warr, and Lady Muriel Agnes Brassey. This little girl, known simply as Idina, would one day be a legend of 20th century scandal. A woman whose appetites and flamboyant love affairs rattled the pillars of British high society and left an indelible mark on Kenya's so-called Happy Valley. She arrived in a swirl of aristocratic connections and extraordinary privilege. Her maternal grandfather was Thomas Brassey, 1st Earl Brassey, fabulously wealthy from shipping and philanthropic endeavors. Her paternal line carried the earldom of De La Warr, forging centuries-deep ties to the monarchy. Cousins like Vida Sackville West added a literary sparkle to the family's pedigree. One might have predicted a conventional path for an aristocratic girl, a sheltered upbringing, a polite debut, then marriage to a respectable gentleman devoted to hosting hunts and garden parties. But from day one, Idina Sackville defied those assumptions. Her mother, Muriel, was a glamorous presence who gave birth to 3 children in quick succession. Idina in 1893, then Lady Avis and Herbrand, the latter destined to become 9th Earl de la Warr. Life at Buckhurst for Idina was initially carefree. The halls echoed with laughter, the patter of staff, and the routine of an aristocratic estate. But fate dealt the child an early sorrow. Muriel died in August 1903 from illness, likely TB or something similarly dreaded by Edwardian society, when Idina was just 10. The official account says the mother collapsed at Buckhurst and never recovered. Idina, who witnessed that final day, was left emotionally shaken. The father, Gilbert, remarried in 1907 to Hilda Treadcroft, a union that seldom provided Idina the maternal warmth she craved. She found solace in her younger siblings, but a sense of displacement and yearning for excitement took root in the child's heart. That restlessness carried into her adolescence. She was bright, beautiful, a magnet for attention. At parties, her eyes sparkled with mischievous ambition. She recognized the limitations placed on women in her station, pretty dresses, politely drifting into a marriage of convenience. She refused to confine herself to that mold. By the time she turned 20 in 1913, she was also bored. War loomed in Europe. The entire Edwardian structure was about to shatter. Perhaps it's no surprise that she seized a chance at a romantic alliance, forging her first marriage to Captain David Ewan Wallace, a wealthy Scotsman with formidable social connections. Their wedding, all rosy columns of flowers and trotting carriages, seemed the apex of elegance. Ewan was well off and dashing. Idina was an it girl with aristocratic lineage. Everyone congratulated them on what promised to be a fairy tale union. She gave birth to 2 sons, David in 1914 and Gerard in 1915. She and Ewan set up house in Kildonan, a lavish property in Scotland. During the war, Ewan served in the British Army, leaving Idina as a hostess and domestic manager. In the early years, the marriage looked strong, but the illusions of Edwardian domestic bliss crackled. Ewan had an affair with Barbara Lutyens, daughter of famed architect Edwin Lutyens, and Idina felt outraged and betrayed. By war's end, gossip about Ewan's infidelity swirled, combined with whispers that Idina herself was no angel in the fidelity department. In 1919, their marriage collapsed, culminating in a sensational divorce. Even more scandalous, Idina chose to leave her 2 boys behind with Ewan. In a society that prized maternal devotion, this was unthinkable. She had effectively bolted, incurring the wrath of the polite world. The bolter, some would call her, a name that stuck for the rest of her life. Idina, though devastated at losing daily contact with her sons, was resolute in her desire for independence. She would carve her path, even if it meant leaving her children and risking condemnation. That same year, 1919, she married Charles Gordon, an impulsive decision. Charles was enthralled by her, seduced by her fiery spirit and languid charm. They embarked on a new life together, traveling to exotic locales, frequenting the bright lights of London's West End. There, Idina's decadent side flourished. She was rumored to dance on tables, swig champagne from her slipper, practice a rebellious disregard for the stiff upper lip. The couple eventually found their way to Kenya, part of Britain's East African colony. Kenya, in the 1920s, offered wide open spaces, minimal scrutiny, and an expatriate class that wanted to escape Europe's post-war gloom. Perhaps it was the freedom of the Kenyan highlands, or the tang of African nights, or simply the restlessness in her soul that drew Idina in. But soon she was entertaining lavishly, forging a reputation as a hostess beyond compare. The Gordon marriage crumbled under her relentless thirst for new lovers. Charles once described her as nymphomaniacal, a harsh label. By 1923, they parted ways. She wasted no time in forging ahead with a new beau, turning the rumor mill into a dizzying swirl. Her third marriage that year was to Jocelyn Hay, 22nd Earl of Errol. He was younger by 8 years, a dashing figure with aristocratic roots. She had a daughter with him, named Diana. They settled at Clouds, a property near Gilgil in Kenya's Great Rift Valley. If scandal had circled Idina before, it exploded now. The Happy Valley set was a group of white colonialists in Kenya known for drug-fueled parties, spouse swapping, and near-constant indulgence in illicit behaviors. They were jaded aristocrats fleeing European conventionality, forging an insular paradise of vice. The rumors around Idina soared, that she greeted guests naked in her green onyx bathtub, dog, named Satan, perched on the side. That she presided over orgies, popping champagne, her laughter echoing through the African night. That relationships hardly lasted beyond a swirl of desire. She was effectively the ringmaster of this traveling carnival of sin. Locals looked on with shock or curiosity. Even among the already decadent crowd, Idina's escapades were something else. Within a few years, though, she and Joss parted ways in 1930. He'd been borrowing money in her name, having affairs, and squandering resources. She'd grown weary. Their divorce further stained her image in polite circles. She was on her third divorce, leaving behind yet another child, little Diana. She turned around in 1930 itself and married an American, Donald Haldeman, venturing into her fourth marriage with a wry sense that perhaps she was unstoppable. But something had changed. The illusions of never-ending youth began to fade. Her social circle was starting to brand her as the bolter, a woman who never stayed put. She traveled, drifting between Europe and Kenya, sometimes returning to London. Haldeman, faced with her unstoppable impulses, parted ways by 1938. Then in 1939, she married her fifth and final husband, Vincent Soltau, a tattooed ex-sailor reputed to have a quiet patience that stabilized her fleetingly. Meanwhile, tragedy stalked her. In 1941, Jocelyn Hay was murdered near Nairobi, found shot in his car. The prime suspect was the cuckolded husband of his latest mistress, but the case was never definitively solved. The scandal was massive. White Mischief, a 1987 film, retold the story, weaving in Idina's presence as part of the swirling rumors of sex, betrayal, and homicide. Some even whispered if Idina had been involved, unsubstantiated but juicy enough for dinner party chatter. She was no longer in Joss's life at the time, but the murder resurrected all the old tales of her brazen hedonism. Yet behind the glitz, she carried deeper sorrows. Her mother's early death haunted her. More crushing still, she'd lost emotional closeness to her two sons from her first marriage. David, born 1914, and Gerard, born 1915, were effectively raised by Ewan Wallace. They followed in the aristocratic tradition of military service. During the World War II, both died in separate campaigns. David in 1943 in Italy, Gerard in 1941 in North Africa. Idina apparently received the news in her Kenyan home clouds, dropping her champagne glass to the floor. Her illusions shattered. Friends said she never truly bounced back from that heartbreak. The boisterous laughter so characteristic of her was replaced by a more hollow merriment. Meanwhile, her daughter Diana from Jocelyn had also been largely estranged from her. After the 1930 divorce, Diana was whisked off, raised by relatives in England, forging a distant relationship with her mother. In 1978, that daughter died from cancer at 52. Idina, by then physically frail, learned of it in a hushed letter, never regaining the bond they might have had. Her final years after her fifth divorce in 1945 were quieter. She lived near Malindi on Kenya's coast, eschewing the manic parties of Happy Valley. She was older now, in her 50s, with exhaustion seeping into her bones. The unstoppable energies had mellowed. She still threw small gatherings, but the giant orgiastic blowouts were behind her. She had debts. 5 divorces and a life of ceaseless partying took a toll on her finances. She might lounge on a beach, the tide lapping at her ankles, mulling over a once scandalous youth that now felt distant. Some nights she'd raise a glass to old memories, but the heartbreak remained. The war had ended, but the world was different. The aristocracy that once gave her a pedestal was fading into irrelevance. The 1950s arrived, bringing modernization. Kenya's independence movement was stirring. The era of white colonials who treated Africa like their personal playground was nearing its twilight. Idina had outlived many of her old companions, but not her regrets. Uterine cancer haunted her final years. The illness progressed painfully, nibbling away at her once voracious vitality. Yet she refused to return to England for prolonged treatments. She liked the African sun, the freedom of that coastal breeze. She accepted occasional help from her ex-husbands. Even Vincent Soltau, her final spouse, offered care. She died in Mombasa on November 5, 1955, age 62, in a hospital bed. A small group, some local friends, perhaps a nurse or two, attended to her as she breathed her last. She was interred in Mbaraki Cemetery. Her grave marked simply as Idina Soltau, 1893 to 1955. No pomp, no giant funeral with aristocratic eulogies. Just quiet closure for a woman who once set entire ballrooms ablaze with scandal. In that final hour, it said she clutched a small photograph of Ewan Wallace, her first love, the father of her lost sons. Tales about the bolter persisted among the British upper crust. Gossip traveled through the decades. Writers used her as a muse. Michael Arlen's 1924 novel, The Green Hat, supposedly drew on her flamboyant exploits. Nancy Mitford's fictional The Bolter was rumored to be inspired by Idina's swirling love life. And in 2008, her great-granddaughter, Frances Osborne, penned a biography titled The Bolter, resurrecting the legend for a modern audience. Some see her as an emblem of female liberation, scorning patriarchal rules, claiming her sexual autonomy. Others see selfishness, a woman who left children behind, who swapped partners at breakneck pace, oblivious to moral codes. Still others interpret her story as an Edwardian tragedy, a talented, witty figure bored to tears by conventional society, undone by the illusions of wealth. She used desire and sensation to numb deeper sorrows, from maternal abandonment to the loss of her own mother. She loved extravagantly, fiercely, but seldom found contentment. The men in her life, from Ewan to Joss to Vincent, rotated in like planets around the scorching sun of her personality. Interestingly, the British press never found a neat box for her. She was simultaneously ridiculed, envied, condemned, and admired. Women's magazines gossiped about her outrageous parties. Hush-hush circles whispered of her wildness. Yet she was also a style icon, known for wearing slinky gowns cut dangerously low, sporting jewels that shimmered in candlelight, offering glimpses of a luscious, rebellious spirit. The tabloids devoured every detail, how she'd greet guests from a bathtub, or how she'd vanish with a new lover at dawn. For some, she was the worst of the aristocracy. For others, the best of it. Fearless, refusing to let destiny confine her. She never saw herself as a victim. She flitted from husband to husband with an airy sense of destiny, chasing euphoria in champagne-fueled nights. The whispered commentary that she had too strong a sexual appetite or that she ruined men financially only fueled her rebellious streak. She once famously said at a dinner party, "I'd rather have one night of real passion than a lifetime of tepid lunches." The cost, though, was immense. When her story ended in 1955, British papers offered short notices about Lady Idina Sackville, once famously Lady Idina Sackville, who died in East Africa. The entire swirl of scandal had subsided over decades. Yet in the hush that followed her passing, legends formed. People recounted how the hostess of clouds had welcomed them, her hair undone, offering a flute of champagne at midday, or how she'd vanished into the bush with a paramour, returning hours later, radiant. The diaries of fellow Happy Valley dwellers mention her name in passing. Idina's party last night, nothing short of insane, or went to clouds for dinner. She wore just pearls and a smile. By the 21st century, novelists, historians, and genealogists revived her memory as a symbol of that bizarre Kenyan colonial microcosm where English aristocrats unleashed every taboo. The mania for her story sparked further inquiries into the tragedies of her life. Dead children, murdered ex-husband, alienation from polite society, financial ruin, a lonely demise. She was far more than a scandal. In 2008, her great-granddaughter Frances Osborne published The Bolter, unveiling family letters and diaries that offered a more nuanced glimpse. The portrayal complicates the caricature of Idina as a scarlet woman. The diaries show warmth, heartbreak, longing for her boys, fleeting happiness with lovers. Taylor Swift, in a 2024 track named The Bolter, is said to reference Idina's fiasco-laden romances, turning it into an anthem about the cost of longing for endless passion. Meanwhile, Nancy Mitford's mention of the Bolter in her novels and Michael Arlen's The Green Hat each reflect the imprint she left on popular imagination. The seductive, unstoppable female who bolts from constraints, leaving heartbreak behind her. Some see that figure as an object lesson in selfishness, others as a rebellious feminist hero before her time. The debate continues. Lady Myra Idina Sackville's life soared across decades of turmoil, from Edwardian England through 2 world wars, bridging a collapsing empire in Kenya. She pinned her name to 5 marriages, each unveiling fresh scandal. She enthralled and appalled, loved deeply but fleetingly, endured horrifying losses, and retreated at last to a quiet patch of the Kenyan coast, undone by disease, alone with her regrets and recollections. She died at 62, a battered survivor of her own choices. That final small funeral in Mombasa might seem anticlimactic for a woman who once commanded entire ballrooms with her presence.